today I am drawing and painting these two lovely kookaburras sitting up in the left-hand side of your screen. I'm going to make them into one painting though. So I've got two separate photographs that I'm going to join together to make one scene. So I'm going to start by drawing this first little kookaburra on the left. Now his head is quite wide. His head and his beak. Now his beak is 1.5 times his head. So, his beak is 3/4 of his head length. So on this bird, so I always measure everything against the head to start with, because it's quite critical that you get all their proportions right for them to look correct. Right to left. But I've got to learn to paint left to right so I don't smudge. I had that trouble with Inktober. I did all my ink drawings, but I kept forgetting and smudging my paint, my ink. Okie doke. So we just got his head drawn in now. Now his beak is 1.5. So make his head a bit wider, like that. Now his head, the width of his head is 1.5 times his body. So 1.5. So that's how long his body is. So his tail will disappear off out the bottom, and that's fine. So I just get, now his chest comes down just in line with the bottom of his beak, or this part of his beak, like that. His head, now the back of his wing comes out a little bit further than his body, like that. And I'm going to do them both sitting on the same branch. So how the one on the left is sitting on a tree stump, I'm going to do them both sitting on a branch so that it become more clear as a pair of birds just in a natural scene. Doesn't matter that the tails are going to pop off the bottom. Does not matter at all. I'll add the wing details in a minute. So now I'm going to pop the second bird in, and I'm going to make them the same height. They're looking at each other. So again, I start with the top of the head. Now his beak is, so I'll do them the same size. So his beak is, oh, hang on, that long. I use my fingers to measure, just so I can mark lengths and distances. You see people, artists, when they're drawing out in nature, they use their pencil, and you'll see them doing this. It's how they measure. So they'll go like that, and that's how they get their measurements instead of a ruler. But I use my fingers because that's how I am. And a lot of times I forget to take rulers and things, so I just use my fingers to measure. And then, because I've always got my fingers with me, I never forget them. Okay, come back and around. And we have these little birds, they live around our place. They're quite common around here. They're not little, actually, they're quite large birds, but they're, yeah, we've got them around here a lot. I actually had one a little while ago that was reasonably tame, and the kids went up and fed him and gave it to him by hand. But then he had his babies out in the nest at the front of our house. And he brought his little young ones to us as well, which was really lovely. And they're still around, but they're... Okay, so now I'm going to come down here. I've got to take his back out a little bit more. Now, there's something I've done. What have I done here? I think his eye's too big. So I can shrink that down a fraction. His body comes again out in line with the bottom of his beak, like that. And I never have things absolutely in the center. You can see I've gone off to the left a little bit. Now his tail comes down here and it'll disappear off down the bottom, and that's fine. Okay. Now I'm going to do them on a branch. So I'm going to draw the branch across here. I'm just going to imagine it. And that's fine. That's nice and easy. I'll do a branch that's coming up there. And that one disappears off out the back. Okay, now I can start to add a bit of detail. So, and I'm going to be using my Australian watercolours and my schminkies today. So I've got my Art Spectrum out and my schminkies. These are my favourite watercolours. Now, I can see he's going to have one claw down the back, like that, and these other ones out the front. Now his wing comes down there, so I've got to add his wing. I can add this wing down the back here too, like that. Now his feathers sort of touch along the back. I'll just get the basic sort of shape of the feathers. Now there's a few different species of kookabuura. There's sort of brighter ones, and they sort of go all the way back to the kingfisher. They're related to the kingfisher. So I'm going to draw these claws around here. Now how many toes can I see? I can see 2 toes at the front and 1 to the back. I forgot to make me a cup of tea. God, I'm silly. Poop. I got my cup out, and of course I forgot to make me cuppa. So I'll just draw in some of the markings now. Okay, so that is basically the outline of these birds done. That is basically them done. So I'm going to start with a background. I'm going to give them a green background. So I'm going to spritz with my spritzer, my good old spritzy spritzer, my water bottle. And I'm going to cut around, I'm going to wet the whole background and cut around the birds very carefully. I don't want to get it onto them. Usually I would go wet paper, but I'm just going to go straight in with the diluted green today. I'm not going to wet the background first. I'm just going to do wet onto dry. So it won't flow as much, but that's okay. I'm going to take that around both of the birds, like that. I think my washing machine's making strange noises. Okay. All right, come around here. I've just got to get this on the paper before the paper dries because it's quite warm. It's overcast, but it's quite warm today. We've had a few beautiful warm days. Come down to the bottom of the beaks, cutting in anything that I miss. I can go back after and just drag back into the ends. And I'm using my silver black velvet brush that all the paint's fallen off because I've loved it to pieces over the last few years. Literally, it's falling apart. All the paint's come off. At least the brush end's intact, so that's good. All right, come around here. I'm just going to carefully keep going around to the bottoms of the tails, to the bottom of the page. And come down and around here. Whoops. I'm going to have to go back over a little bit just to, you can see that paper's dried as fast as I've put it on. It has dried, because that's how warm it is here. I'm going to make it slightly stronger and just darken up, not all of it, but I'm going to model it, sort of make it mottly in the background. So that paper has dried instantly, almost instantly. Got to be careful and just soften these edges, damp my brush and just drag out. I don't want it to be just looking flat. Drag out the edges just to soften that up. Come down and around. Blend that out. Back to the edge, like that. I'm liking that better. I like it a bit more, a bit stronger, a bit more, not so flat looking. Let's drag those edges right to the bird. So I'm sort of mimicking the back of the left bird. I've got to go down underneath, get a bit more olive on my brush. And come down and around here. Take it right down against the wing, that side of the tail, using the tip of my brush. That's why I like round brushes. You can use the sides or the tip. You can use either or. Come down and around. Blend that. That'll look a lot better at the end. Like once I've done the birds, you forget the background. The background's secondary. The background is secondary. The birds are the focus. I might even eventually, when I've done the painting, go over the background again and just like put more of a, like they call it bokeh. Depends on your pronunciation. I'm just going to soften up that line there. I don't like that line right there. Got to get a bit more green on there. Pop some more around. Just here, hither and dither, all the places. There we go. I'm going to leave that alone. In a minute, says she. Okay. Darken up just along here. The bottom's a lot darker than the top, so I want to change that. There we go. All right, that'll do. That'll do for the background. So I'm going to well, that is drying. It's drying as I speak. So I'm going to go back to my size 6. I want a size 6 brush. Now, because the base of these birds, the bottom of these birds is mostly sort of a greyish tone. So I'm going to mix up my grey, which is burnt umber and cobalt blue. This is my go-to U-Butte grey mixture. Burnt umber, cobalt blue. And that makes a lovely browny grey, which is pretty much the colour on the back feathers and also around the eyes. So I'm going to start, while the background's still drying, with a light wash of this browny grey onto the face feathers. So anywhere I can see that. So on bird number 2, pop it over here and then come back and around. Just mark in roughly where the colours are going to be. He's got lovely variegated feathers on the top of his head, but I'll worry about that in just a minute. Again, come onto this first bird, get some more water on your brush. So this is like layer number 1. There'll be about 4 layers of colour, and then the last layer is detail. So you work from light to dark, building them up as you go. Now that grey actually goes, I've got to bring his beak back a bit further when I add more detail. So just going to do it this, I'm going to leave little spots for the grey and the blue because he's got little blue feathers on his back. So I've got to leave little snippets for the blue. Not going to be exactly like the photo, but that doesn't matter. I'll just leave the shapes of the feathers where the blue ones are going to be, and I'll wash the rest with, I'll leave a couple of lines for the light paper because you can see the split between the feathers. Come down to the back here. Now he's darker at the bottom of his feathers, lighter at the top. But so this is the first layer. I will add darker detail to these ones down on his back. Got to do rough little lines onto his neck. You can see he's got quite light grey feathers down there. I'll leave a few little bits of paper showing just to help. He's quite brown down here, but I'm going to do a base layer of grey. That's actually transparent sienna pretty much, but I've added the base layer and I'll go over that with a warmer tone in a little bit. Now, this bird over here is predominantly sort of light grey with the brown feathers on the wings, but you can see more of the grey on his tummy and his face. And so I'll come down and around here and then drag that down onto his wing down there. I can see he's got the patterns on his tails there, on his tail. So I'll just mark those in very roughly. And I can also go over now. I can see on the left bird, this one's got brown on the top of his beak. So I'm going to add that. And drag that down. Wet my brush, clean it, wet it, drag it. Clean it, wet it, drag it. Just to tint the beak. I'll leave the bottom of the beak though, because the bottom of the beak is a taupey colour. Same on this bird. Come down and around the top. Okay, so that's sort of just basically blocked in. I will add this little variegated feathers on the top of this one's head. Can't see them so much on this other bird, but I will add a couple in anyway. Okay, so I'm going to go my transparent sienna now. So, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add this into the eye, into the iris. So he's going to have this beautiful golden brown into the iris of his eyes, because they've got beautiful golden brown eyes. So I'll just go around that iris quite carefully, and I'll pop the pupil in a little bit. And it's a stronger tone than the grey, so I can pop it over the grey like that. Having a look, I can't see, there's a highlight on the top of the pupil, so I'll leave a bit of the white of the paper for the highlight on the pupil. I'm going to use my Daniel Smith colour. It is, I forgot what it's called already. My friend Lani yesterday told me the name of it again, but I've completely forgotten it all over again. I always forget the name, but it's this beautiful taupey sort of colour, and I love it. And I use it a lot, especially in animals. And it's a Daniel Smith colour. It'll come to me. The name will come to me, I promise. I'll remember. But it's this gorgeous sort of sandy colour. It's just lovely. And it's perfect for the bottoms of the beaks on these birds. It will dry back maybe 1 or 2 tones darker. Lighter, sorry, 2 tones lighter. I'll just pick up any excess. And it's sort of a semi-opaque. So I'm going to go back in with some stronger browny grey. So I'm going to go back to my burnt umber. And I'm going to start to add some stronger browns, but with feather texture. So this is layer number 2. I'll leave a little bit of the undertone showing through, like that, because you want to be able to see some highlights and differences. You don't want it just one flat colour. And I'm going to add some blue onto this bird as well. It's lovely turquoise, actually. They've got a turquoise sort of coloured feathers. Come right down to there. Go back onto this left-hand side bird. Get a bit more paint, less water. Add that a little bit too diluted. Start to add some little swathes of feathery texture, like that. And again onto his back over the top of those colours. I'm going to add sort of little feathery shapes. They sort of come up into a V onto the nape of his neck, like that. Come down a bit further. I've got to remember to leave the highlights for the blue. So I'm just roughing in shapes. I'm not thinking feathers. I'm just thinking shapes. So they're little sort of half circly. These feathers down here are, well, he's got beautiful little, I'm using the side of my brush just to do little swoops of the colour, like that. And then onto his tail, I'm going to do little sweeps because he's got that beautiful brown, golden brown pattern coming down his tail. And you can just see the underside of this one. I'm not going to worry about that one so much just yet. I'm going to go in with, I'm going to get my turquoise. I'm going to go Australian turquoise out of my Art Spectrum colours, because it is very true to these birds. So beautiful Australian turquoise, and I'll pop that on just around his wing areas where I can see the turquoise. It's not going to be exactly the same as the reference, but that's why it's a painting, not a photograph. So come down here, and on this bird you can see the turquoise down the front of his feathers, down the front of his wings here. I might add another layer of that in a little while. I'll just let that sit for the moment. I'm going to go onto the bird's pupils. So I've got Payne's Grey, the very tip of my brush, and I'm going to leave a highlight, which will be the white of the paper. So I've got to get the very tip of my brush wet. Oops, I need to get it a bit wetter than that. There we go. Very tip of my brush wet. And I'm going to leave a little half circle at the top of the eye. See, I've cut around the edge of the eye, the pupil, and that leaves the highlight, which gives you the sparkle on the eye of the bird. So again, wet my brush. I'll do the same thing for the other bird. Circle around the complete pupil. Leave a little half circle at the top for the highlight, and then complete the circle. And that leaves them their little highlight, which brings them to life. It really does help to bring them to life. I'm actually going to do a dark ring around the edge of the whole eye, or 3/4 of the eye, just to help stand out a bit like that. There we go. So that's their little eyes in. Now I'm going to go back and have another look. I've got to add some texture. I'm going to make up a very, very pale grey. So it's just, it's a very light blue grey. And I'm going to start diluted, very diluted again, adding shadowy areas like that. And I can start to build up the feathery textures on the chests. Again, just cutting the shadows in and the shapes. Just having a look. This one's got, you can see the little, I have to use a brown for that, a light brown for the different. He's got very variegated feathers, so I've got to add very light brown as well to create the feather texture in the next layer. I'm leaving a lot of the white of the paper because, as you can see, these birds have light tummies. So I'm going to leave a lot of the white of the paper. Come down here. You always get to a point where you're like, doesn't look right, but you've got to have faith that the picture comes together in the end. You've got to have confidence in yourself, because I always get to a point in the painting where I'm like, it's not working, but then it always works. Well, not always, but most of the time it works. So I'm going to fill in these feathers down here using that bluey grey that I've made. Whoops. Doesn't matter if that's a bit darker, because you can see that a bit more clearly anyway. Like that. And come up there. Okay. Having another look back. A bit stronger there. So I started with light and I'm working to dark. I'm also going to add this bluey grey now onto the beak. Back onto the beak. You can see I'm starting to build up the layers of tones and colours. I started with my lightest and working my way up. Go onto this other bird, do the same thing. I was having a quick look. It's got more of a grey beak. Got to bring its beak back a bit more. So that's good. I can go over that because it's a darker paint. That's why you work light to dark. So I can go over the lighter tones like that. Then he's got the darker scoop there. Leave a little bit of gap. And I'll go back into that with the brown. I've got to keep my brush. See, that sort of shape's a little bit wrong there, so I fixed that up. Same on this bird. Get that little bit of a grey scoop on the back of his beak. His nostrils up here. So you start to look for the finer detail is what I'm trying to say, the finer detail. I'm going to darken up. I'll get my brush damp it. I'm going to blend out the bottom of that beak on that little bird. Okay. Now I'm going to go in with my blue. I'm going to go cobalt blue, super diluted, super duper duper diluted. And I'm going to add feathery texture around the lightest parts because the blue is a reflection on white of the sky. Can't really see it in the photographs, but that's okay. Come down and around. Okay. Down around the front of the birds. And onto the belly. I'm going to add this blue. So I'm just filling in. With the darker shadowy areas. You can see this other bird on the right is more in shadow. So I'm just using my cobalt blue for that. And I'll take that down onto the tail as well. Take that down the whole length of the tail. Because you can see the underside of the bird is almost completely in shadow. Like that. And I use the blue for the shadow tone. Okay, I've got to darken up this eye. So I'm going to grab some burnt umber. I just strengthen up the darker tone in that eye. And also in that one. Like that. I'm going to go sepia. The sepia from my Art Spectrum paints is about the right tone that I need. So I'm going to use my sepia and start to get some stronger tones around. And I want to sort of ruffle up the feathers a little bit. Because he's got, you can see the feathers aren't flat. They've got sort of rough spots, and I'll add a few different textures around just to soften things up. You can see he's got the dark down the bottom there. So he's starting to come to life. He's starting to come together. Slowly, slowly, catchy monkey, as my dad used to say. Come back and around. So I'm going to continue on. So now I'm going to add some feather texture down the wings. Just what I see with this sepia. I'm just going to, using the tip of my brush and creating the lines for the feathers. They do come over the edge of his tail, so I'll add those on, same on the other side. Like that. Okay. And I'll grab some more of that sepia onto this bird. You can see his wings actually come out from his back a little bit, so I'll take those back there. Like that. Add in a few more details down here. And I'm going to dilute that sepia to add the texture onto the top of his head, like that. And you can see he's quite darker around the top of his eye, so I'll darken that up. That will help to make that pop. So that's fine. And then also take that behind his head, like that. And then under here, and around there. Okay. And I can use that sepia. You can see it's a lovely dark colour, which is exactly what I need. I've got to soften this eye. This eye's looking a bit too hard. I think I need to make the pupil a bit more round. So I'll take the pupil down a fraction further, actually on both birds. Being careful to leave the highlight in the eye. That's a bit better. I think that's a bit better. And go back onto the feathers here. Add the sepia. Also add it in the top a little bit, just in the ruffly bits of feathers, because you can see there's shadows in there, like that. And add a little bit just to these other feathers on his back. It will dry back a little bit lighter. Create sort of rougher feathers down here. The feather there. He's got longer feathers here. So 1, 2, I can see 4 or 5 actually. So I'll just do these lines in long sweeping strokes, like that. And then he's got stronger feathers there, coming down. Like that. Okay. Quite happy with that. It'll do. Come down and around here, like that. Having a quick look, I can see some darker feathers there. He's darker around the blue. So I'll come around these blue feathers, like that. Starting to add in the feathery textures now. Still using the sepia, love the sepia. And create little feathers there. Don't have to be exactly the same as the photograph. I'm just suggesting the feathers. Come down to the bottom of these ones and darken those ones, just doing little sweeps up. And on the other side, you can just see there's a couple there, just sweep that up. Okay. And a little sweep of the darker colour there. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. I'm going to work on the stick for a bit that they're sitting on their perch. So I'm going to wet the perch. I can go over where the toes are because the toes are going to be darker than the perch. So I just literally wash that up, wet the paper, and I'm going to drop in yellow ochre. Drop in yellow ochre straight in the top. And you'll see that'll flow down and do what watercolour does best, like that. Okay, while that's still wet, I'm going to add burnt umber. Get some more burnt umber. I need it to be a bit stronger than that. Some more burnt umber. Come down and around, like that. Get that colour everywhere I want it. I can add a little bit of shadow underneath these birds in a minute. I might add some indigo actually. Indigo is a great shadow colour. So I'm going to go into my indigo. And I'm going to drop that in directly below the bird just to get that darkest shadow. I'm going to let it flow in amongst it like that. Same on this bird. Pop that all in there, anywhere that I can imagine the shadow will be. Clean my brush and I can drag that out just to the edge of the top of the stick like that, just to diffuse it a little bit so it's not quite so harsh looking. Come down here under the stick like that. I can take that down bottom of that stick, part of the stick, there we go. That, I might just diffuse this a little bit more here. Clean my brush. Actually, I'll get my bit of cloth and I'll just dab that out just to make it a little bit more pale. There we go. That's a bit better. That's less harsh. And diffuse this little bit here. I'll do the toes in a minute. Drag that out so it sort of blends into the rest of the wood. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to go in with a stronger grey. I'm going to use that blue actually onto the beak and get some of this detail onto his beak like that. It's darker underneath there like that. Okie doke. Use my indigo, get some more of that on my palette. I'm going to pop his little nostril in here. And I'm going to follow around the edge of his beak. And that almost comes up under his eye. There we go. Their beaks come sort of up under their eye a little bit. Okay, I'm also going to take this indigo onto the back feathers, strengthen them up a little bit, like that. And onto the bottoms of these wing feathers, just here. Anywhere that I can see is darker. Just in the shapes of feathers. Like that. Come down here. That. I'll add a little strip down the back, the center of his back, because you can see he's got that little strip. And I'm going to add some of my burnt umber next to it, just to build that little bit there up. Come down a fraction more onto his back. I can wash over the colors I've got there, because that will actually you'll still be able to see the underneath colours. There we go. I'm happy with that. I'll leave that one alone. I'm going to add a little bit more of a brown, but I'm going to go with a touch of, I think I'm going to go a touch of raw umber. Get a little bit of raw umber. It's a yellowy brown. Clean my palette a little bit. Get a bit of raw umber. Bit of yellow ochre, a bit of raw umber. And I'm going to take that carefully around these. You can see he's got little ripples of feathers under here on his belly. So I add these in like that. And they also come that way, just into the fuzzy wuzzy bits. Like that, and I can see them all the way down this side as well. So I'll add a few on this side. The light's hitting them. And they come down under his tail. I'll add a few onto this little bird's face as well, because you can see them. He's got little dotted feathers around there. They come down onto the back of his face like that. And I'm quite happy with that. It's looking pretty cool. Looking pretty cool. I'll darken up here, and I can add little streaks of colour coming down that way. Right, I'm going to leave that alone at that. I'm going to add some stronger grey, except I'm going to use blue, onto the top of the beak. I'll cut around the nostril. Take it along the beak of the bird, like that. There we go. I'm going to get a bit of this raw umber mix, and I'm going to come around this part of the beak of the bird. Pop it onto the beak as well. There we go. Quite happy with that. Okay. So I am quite happy with that. So I reckon I'm going to do a little bit more around the edge of the eye. A little bit more around the edge of the eye. The very tip of my brush. Like that. Just to strengthen that. I've got to do the toes. I've got to do the toes, and the toes are a greyish tone. So I'm going to go, got a bit of grey still mixed on my palette here. I'll add a bit of blue to it. Burnt umber, oh gosh, bit of burnt umber cobalt blue to make that grey again. Burnt umber cobalt blue. Dilute it so it's more pale. And go onto the stem. Get some on the tip of my brush. Like that. I can only see 2 toes in the front. I go onto the tip of the toes. Like that. And then there's one to the back. Like that. And this one, you can just see, I can see the back of his feet. And it goes around the pole like that, around the stick. And I'll just dilute that off a little bit. That'll dry back pale, more pale. I'll just lift some of that off as well. Get rid of a bit of the excess. There we go. Let that dry. Now you can see I've got a bit of a smudge over here. I'm going to try and clean that off just with, get a little bit of water on my brush and just give that a little scrub. There we go. And I've cleaned up that little mess that I'd made. Just dab it with my cloth, bit of clean kitchen towel, and that's cleaned that up. So I'm quite happy with that. So now I'm having a quick look at my reference. I'm going to get a little bit of dark, like a grey, and I'm just going to touch where the nails are. Pop it. Oh, they've got too much on there. Doesn't matter. Just dab the little claws, go underneath the toe. Add a little bit of texture. Little blibs of, well, that's still damp. And there we pretty much have it. So I'm going to sign that. It's just a quick watercolour sketch of 2 kookaburras. It was a fun one for today. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'd love it if you click like and subscribe. Click on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified when I release a new video. And I will be back tomorrow at some stage. I'm not sure what time tomorrow, but I will be back tomorrow. And hopefully my internet's working, so I will be able to live stream, because I started a live stream and it didn't work. My internet crashed. So hopefully it'll all be sorted by tomorrow. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Yep, click like and subscribe. Click on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified when I release a new video. And have an awesome day. Okie doke. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.